Thanks for joining us, everyone. I'm Scott. I'm in charge of digital learning at Basingstoke College of Technology, and I'm a teacher as well. I'm joined by the wonderful Sky Caves, a senior learning technologist, Holly Hunt, another senior learning technologist, and the mighty Becca Starkis, course director of our creative subjects at Basingstoke College of Technology as well today. And we're going to be sharing with you today some ways we've used tech with purpose, because we're 6 years into using tech mindfully, intentionally, with always an eye on being led by the pedagogy first across all of our vocational areas at the college. And we're really keen to share and collaborate with all schools and colleges as part of the EdTech demonstrator program. So please get in touch with us about that. Contact the team in the chat, email us, and we can give you free, no strings attached, peer-to-peer, teacher-to-teacher support with anything you need, from strategy writing to giving you resources to come and being there in person, showing you about things like VR and other interesting, engaging, innovative ways of thinking about learning. So here's an overview that Holly's put together for us, which sort of outlines our approach in terms of why we choose the tech we choose and why we approach things the way we approach them. That student-first approach, that empathy mapping, listening, being present with, talking to learners is something we really pride ourselves on, from having learners graduate to become student digital leaders who become Sky Caveses and Holly Hunts here at the college, to being in their independent study zones, listening to them, talking to them the whole time about how learning's working for them, meeting their needs, particularly people who learn differently. We have quite a large quota of learners here at the college who do learn in different ways. Preparing students for industry expectations. So as well as listening and empathy mapping with the students, working with our industry experts in each subject area, making sure that what we're doing aligns with what the students are going to be expected to be doing when they move on from their time with us. Time saving, that's the big one for me, certainly, in terms of giving people back their evenings, their weekends, streamlining things, giving them more time to focus on the human bits that can never be automated or digitized. Using tech with that intention is something we're increasingly focused on, with our complete aim on improving digital well-being for staff and students across our college and all schools and colleges we're lucky enough to work with. The idea of automating and dividing duplication is something we're looking to do with our corporate teams as well, just improving people's lives with technology, using it with that focus. Assessment, capturing evidence as it happens, naturally occurring evidence. Becca's an art teacher as well as being a course director, and the naturally occurring evidence that happens in Becca's and Pete Hardy's lessons in particular, that need-to-need, teacher-to-student mentoring, thinking about how we might capture that using audio and video and other ways to bottle that lightning, as it were, of learning and that progress, those formative checks, using tech to capture assessment. In terms of streamlining the external verifier workflow as well, something Becca and I were literally just talking about before we started this webinar. The last one, quality. I work in the teaching and learning and quality team, so it all comes under that umbrella, really. Using technology to enhance things, remodify them, and to actually augment the way we think about learning. It's really important to us. We've had some nice feedback from Ofsted over the years, both in 2016, our last full inspection. We are due another full inspection, imminent. And we've had an online learning review and a pilot inspection, which went very nicely. Thanks for asking. And we had some nice feedback as to how we might help others use technology in the classroom. So I've got some things to share. Thank you, Holly. So in terms of meeting learner needs, that's probably the big driver for us, and that learner focus and the way we think about technology. This is something that we do from considering the needs of our specialist provision learners, those learners who learn differently, who come from non-traditional routes to education. Sky created this video in the top left-hand corner there with the magnificent Lindsay Spillane going through and showing spaces to students who are somewhat apprehensive and anxious about coming into the college and getting used to the space, knowing where the offices are, knowing where the loos are, knowing where the cafe is, and so on. using tech to make sure that we are meeting the needs of learners in terms of engaging them and having them have a voice in a way that they're familiar with, whether it be joining in online debates using tools like Twitter and other chat collaboration tools, using tools like Pear Deck in the bottom left-hand corner there, where students can give us little checks, little barometer checks on how they're feeling in terms of their well-being. That's been a bit of a game changer in English recently. They're using that really well, just to find out how people are feeling in terms of their understanding or just their general well-being. Using forms in the top right-hand corner there as to how people feel. Can't always articulate it using words, but interestingly, using emojis, we're getting some interesting traction on people's general temperament and how they're feeling about things. Like a stress check, yeah, it's on Pear Deck, Beth. It's really good. It's on the free version as well of Pear Deck. Really good. Can't recommend that enough. For Microsoft PowerPoint or Google Slides, just adds on. Really nice. And using tools like Padlet in the middle there of sharing examples of just how tech can be used to enhance people's careers, having opportunities for students to comment in a way that they're familiar with and to engage with media in a way that they do in their free time. Bringing that to learning is something we're really keen on doing, always with the intention of putting at the heart of it pedagogy. We use this a lot. This was probably about 2 years ago it was published, but that's our baseline, I would argue, recently, in terms of us being more conscious in FE in particular of T-levels on the horizon and making sure we are preparing our learners for the expectations of industry, making sure what we do aligns with what the World Economic Forum identifies as being the most attractive skills of the future, the ones that are going to be the most employable. And if you look at the top 5 or so of the top 10 skills of 2025, they include deeply human skills such as analytical thinking, problem solving, creativity, initiative, analysis. Go to the next slide for me, please, Holly. So that aligns with something else we really are very passionate about. This idea of valuing what, Beth, you and I talked about this yesterday, in terms of what are much maligned culturally as soft skills in a somewhat passive-aggressive way from some people, and reconfiguring them and recontextualizing them as core skills, as fundamental human skills that can never be digitized or automated away. Tech should be used to enhance them, and we try to do it that way around. And these core skills of compassion, originality, responsibility, and empathy are very much aligned with what the World Economic Forum has identified for us as being the employable skills of the future. We don't know what jobs are going to be in the future, 10, 15, 20 years from now, but we do know that these skills are going to be more valuable than ever. So to make sure we are using tech to help our students practice and develop confidence and abilities in this area, this domain, is something that is of worth and a fight worth fighting, as it were. So you might be familiar with this, the old SAMR, as some pronounce it, the idea of approaching tech and thinking about, well, why are we using it in this way? Is it just a superficial substitution of maybe a worksheet into a online document, in which case we're just substituting it with no real functional change, we're just maybe streamlining things a little bit? Or are we augmenting things, functionally improving things and making it a little bit better, making it a little bit more dynamic, engaging, interesting, and doing something more than what the original could do? Or are we using it to modify, to actually significantly redesign the task and to actually help it to do things and to reach our learners in ways that the task never could prior to that inclusion of technology? But what we really try to do is aim towards the redefinition, really, using tech to allow new tasks previously inconceivable. For example, using social media, websites, blogs, videos, audio to actually really collate and curate and present ways of understanding and learning that perhaps the old-fashioned worksheet couldn't quite manage to even attempt to approach. Using virtual reality to create simulated environments to have our students practice in safe environments over and over before they get hands-on with the physical resources. Using tech to redefine learning is ultimately where we want to be aiming, but at modification redefinition is where we tend to land. Okay, I'll pass over to my colleague at this point. Sky, I believe it's you taking over now.
Yes, thank you, Scott. Hi, everyone. So now that Scott's given an overview of, I suppose, some of the things we bear in mind, I just wanted to cover an actual strategy that we've used quite a lot at the college. So student-staff partnerships. Scott had 6 digital leaders, is that right, Scott?
About 8 it was, I think, in the end, yeah.
8. Back in 2015-16, and that really formed the basis of what our team is today. We've talked a lot in previous presentations about student-staff partnerships, and in 2017 or 18, we also were involved in a project with the EdTech, looking at student-staff partnerships in a bit more detail. So before we go on to some of the examples of the tech that we've used at the college, we just wanted to cover the basis of how we approach our student-staff partnerships. So the next few slides are taken from the toolkit that Holly and I put together for this project. It was an ARTLA project with the EdTech. And essentially we put together a kind of digital workbook for students to work on. And they worked with a member of staff. Becca actually had a group of students doing a task with her for this project. And essentially the teacher would give them a problem or an issue or something they wanted to improve. So that might be they wanted to find new ways of doing formative assessment in the classroom. They wanted to find ways to streamline marking, whatever that teacher felt was something they wanted to work on and tech might have a place to help with. And then the students would then go off and investigate different EdTech tools that were available. And we put together a few pages like this to help them have a think about what we as technologists sort of think about, I think, quite intuitively now when we're evaluating new technologies. So on this page, for example, we've got them thinking about the interface and the design. Is it going to be something that's easy to use, both for the teacher and for their peers? Use and setup. Is it something that is going to take a long time for the teacher to set up and use in the classroom, or is it kind of sign in and go straight away? The functionality and suitability. So we got a lot of the teachers who were running the partnerships, we got them to create almost like a brief for the students. So it's kind of a format they were familiar with. So the teachers would provide almost a checklist of what they wanted. So whether it was something that needed to be web-based, whether it was something they wanted to everyone to have to log in and have an account, or just to be able to jump onto. And then the students would go through and tick that off. And then finally, navigation and accessibility as well. So we always, whenever we vet new tools to use in the college, we make sure that it's got an accessibility statement for third parties, but also we just get our students to evaluate generally, do they think it's something that's accessible that all of their peers and themselves will be able to use. So this is another page from the workbook here. And this again was getting the students to reflect on what it was teaching. So as well as looking at meeting their teacher's goal that had been set, we also have about what skills it's teaching. And this goes back to the core skills, really. Is it a tool that helps them develop their communication skills? One of our projects used Flipgrid, for example, and that was in our specialist provision department, and they were using Flipgrid to get used to their skills when speaking, but not necessarily having to do it in front of their whole class of peers. And then also getting them to look at what could cause setbacks and problems. And the idea of doing this was the students could test this and trial it and almost emulate using it in a classroom environment, so that they could then provide the teacher that they were working with a quick sort of FAQ. This is what this is how it works. These are things that might go wrong, because let's be honest, when you're implementing a new tool or sort of method, there's always going to be things that go wrong. But the idea of the partnership is that the students can use their time to work on it, have a look in it and kind of troubleshoot it almost. And then going forwards, these students who more often than not were students of the teacher they were working with, could then also support in the classroom. They created how-to guides, etc. And this is just another page that was from the workbook. Now, what I'm going to do as well is I'm just going to paste into the chat the toolkit that was created off the back of the project. So in this toolkit, it's got a few of the slides that you'll see here, but also, so there were 4 different colleges leading, and each college had a minimum of 3 partnerships. So these slides here show the approach that we took, but you'll see throughout this toolkit that there were a few different approaches, and quite often we speak to different schools and colleges looking at implementing a student digital leader model. I can see there's been some chat. I can see Richard's talking about a student digital ambassador program. And what we found is that the model that we've used, the model we tried in the program, it's not always going to translate exactly to different environments. So what was really nice about the toolkit is, as you'll see, it was a few different colleges up and down the country, different sizes, also a training provider involved. So you can get an idea of how this might work in different environments. So I've just popped that link in there now. And I believe that's the end of this section. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Holly.
Lovely, thank you. So we're now just going to look at some of the examples of how different areas of our college use technology. And to start with, I'm just going to preface it with this slide here. Oh, if it moves me. And what we've got here is a 5-minute tech lesson plan. And essentially this helps you to plan a techie lesson. And it's got a grid on the end, which will help you sort of define what tools you might want to use. Becca very kindly helped do a walkthrough in this as well. So again, that's available if you want to see how she set it up. So you can see here, this is what the grid looks like, probably very familiar to a lot of you when you're lesson planning. And this is the grid at the end. So for us, we were able to kind of define things into 4 different sections. So those capturing evidence tools, marking tools, engagement and inclusion tools, and collaboration and communication. And they're all linked there, so you can have a go. And I'll pop that in the chat at the end. So to look at some of those examples then, to begin with, we've got reusable resources. So a lot of these different examples here are about how teachers were able to create those long-standing resources that can go on year after year to help save them time. Essentially, the teacher could share this in, for example, Google Classroom or Teams, and the students can go back and reflect and study and revise the different elements that have been set up. And we've got a few examples here. So down in the bottom right, we've got Mark from our Borden facility in Alton, and he's just demonstrating how to do joinery tasks there. And in the middle, we've got one of our engineering lecturers who created a YouTube series on different engineering principles. And you can see in his example there, he's got timestamps along the way, so then students could jump back and forth to the areas they wanted to focus on. In the bottom left as well, we've got Justin from hospitality, and this was particularly over lockdown. So he used the tools that he had available to him at home in order to demonstrate cooking and still do those practical tasks. And last but not least, in the middle there, we've got our light board. So we're really lucky to have this down at the college. But you can see there that we create these interactive videos where staff can actually write on a board and demonstrate. Next up, we've got collaboration. So again, one of those really core skills is about talking and communicating with each other. And we use a range of tools for that. So the main ones we've got here are Jamboard, which is the Google product, but you could use Microsoft Whiteboard. Or we've got things like Miro, which is really brilliant. And all of these are really great, particularly as starter activities or sort of brainstorming and group activities where the students can be posed with a question or a topic and they have to research and formulate their ideas together. In the bottom left there as well, it's just another example of collaboration where a group of students have all designated themselves different roles. So you've got the students who are filming, another was taking pictures for social media and to blog and promote, another one was the main talker, and they all collaborated on a document to create the script for that project. Next up is evidence. So one of the main ways to kind of capture evidence is probably using video. And we've got lots of nice examples here of how that can work. We've got a really charismatic automotive student in the top left there. So he created a series of different YouTube videos going over through the processes that are involved in doing an MOT or changing the tyres and other functions. And again, that was something that really helped in terms of actual industry upskilling, because nowadays a lot of automotive and garages have to actually do video recordings for their clients. We've got some other examples there. So we've got Jay in the top right. So he was actually creating a 3D scan of I think it's called a wheel chassis, can't quite remember. But again, that meant that the students could actually capture and look at things, and then they had the ability to annotate this afterwards to label the diagram. We've got down in the middle right, Google Sites. So this was a really great way of our construction students, as well as animal management, actually creating and curating their own content. So every time they did a task in our flipped learning, or it could be in the classroom, they would then document that on their Google site. And particularly in areas like construction, it meant they were able to take those videos and pictures in the classroom, actually capturing the work that they were doing and the processes involved. And again, this then goes beyond the classroom, because it's a portfolio ready for them to use after work. And we've had a really great use of this in media makeup, where a student created her portfolio and then went on to get a contract with a media makeup firm. So it was really, really brilliant. Lots of other great examples on there. Again, we've got the TikTok there. So again, over lockdown, students used social media to capture how they did a hairdressing straightening process. And again, it's just real good evidence for online professionals to see the work that they can do, and that could lead on to employment. So tying into that, again, we've got this professionalism. So we tend to use social media and websites as the main way of kind of creating these portfolios. And with a lot of students, so for example, the barbering students, they were really into Instagram anyway. And it was really important for us to kind of use the tools that they were already using, but actually teach them how to use it in a way that is professional and gives them a good digital reputation. So it was a way of embedding that digital safety and wellness into this module for them. We also have in the top left there, so this was the beauty students who actually did a social media takeover during lockdown, where they had to meet certain criteria and each have a week where they took over the Evolve Salon's social media. And with that, they had to do a video introducing themselves. They had to talk about the products and materials that they were selling. They had to create posters and advertisements. So again, it was a real way of teaching them the importance of how to market and promote themselves as individuals once they leave the college. So now I'm just going to pass over to Becca, who's going to go through a few more.
Hello, thank you. So as Scott mentioned, I teach as well as managing the departments. So time is quite precious, and I find that what you can see on the screen here is one of the best ways that I can stop myself answering the same questions over and over and over and over again. So what you can see is made using Screencastify predominantly, which is a platform that allows you to film yourself and your computer screen as you are talking through something. You don't have to have your camera on if you don't want to. You can do audio only. So I set these up for the start of pretty much every project that I run with my students. I will have my project brief on the screen. I will talk them through each element of the project brief, the criteria, what I'm expecting, what the difference is between, for example, a pass, a merit, and a distinction, or whatever grading profile you're working with, as a way to essentially give them all of the information that I can in one go. They usually are about 20, 25 minutes. I upload them to YouTube and I timestamp them so students can go, to task 2 or task 3 or the final piece or whatever it might be. And they can watch these back as many times as they like. So if it's 2 a.m. the night before the deadline and they suddenly can't remember what they need to do, they're not messaging me. They're going on here, they're listening back to me saying what I need to do. And it helps them to just make sure that they're hitting all of that criteria. And like you said, I'm not repeating the same things. And you have some of my colleagues here giving other examples where they're talking through example work. So using that as a reference for students. We also use it for marking. So especially where Holly's saying students might submit a digital portfolio or a website. Quite often we'll have the website on the screen and us in the corner, and we'll talk through it and give feedback. You can highlight sections and go, this is really good, but why don't you think about this? And then it's all recorded in evidence there. Moderators have responded really well to it as well. We share the links with them and say, look, this is the feedback that the learners are getting. Especially during lockdown, it was invaluable because we had a more kind of personal connection with them. I don't know about you guys, but our students were not massive fans of coming on camera and talking to us. So this was one of the best ways we could kind of give them that one-to-one kind of personal feedback, and give, a little bit more humanity to what we were doing. You also get a much better sense of tone and sort of voice with what you're doing. So Screencastify is what you need for this. There is, with everything, a paid account as well as a freebie, but the free version, I think, lets you do 5 minutes of recording, whereas I think the paid one is unlimited. £20 a year, is it, guys? Something like that. Something like that. So so that's a really nice way to save you lots of time and also build on resources year on year. So if you don't change your project briefs, if you're clever when you record your videos and you don't put any times or dates in them, you can just keep using them. I personally haven't, Richard. I've had a really positive response from our exam boards. We work with OCR and University Arts London, who have really kind of embraced this and been quite kind of forward thinking with it. I'm not sure if the English department have had similar issues, but yeah, maybe a bit more of a sales pitch on them, and maybe as time goes on and people become more receptive, and hopefully you can carry on using it. But definitely use it for formative feedback if you can't summative, because I found it really useful. Holly, do you want to click your button? So resource banks. My area in particular within the creative industries is massive, and we are always trying to encourage the students to do additional research, to upskill, to become kind of geeks for their subject and really delve into things. But the internet is a big place, and sometimes they need a little direction. So what we've been working on over the last sort of 2 or 3 years is building up websites full of resources and links for them to go back to. So the one in the bottom left is the art and design one that we've set up, and we've created resources for every sort of subject area within that. So illustration, graphics, photography, fine art. And then within that, we'll put in YouTube tutorials, we'll put in links to articles, books that they can read, Netflix documentaries, we'll add in good universities linked to that subject area, we'll put in exhibitions that are coming up, any kind of podcasts they can listen to, just anything that's going to get them sort of experiencing, finding out more, building up a broader sort of knowledge base. And what we found, well, the reason we did this was because lecturers all had all of these great resources that we'd give to students individually when it came up in conversation, and we go, oh, go look at that, go look at that. And we didn't have a central sort of hub for all of it. And it meant that things were getting kind of missed. So I'm very lucky. I have a team of technicians who actually during lockdown, when we had a bit more time away from machinery and health and safety things, they set this up. This was their kind of lockdown project, and it now means we just keep adding to it and we just keep populating it, and it just acts as a really great reference point for students to extend their subject knowledge. But also, if they've got a spare 10-15 minutes at the end of a lesson, it's like, oh, go and have a read, go and find something. And what's lovely is they then share things back with us, and they go, oh, can you put this on, which is really lovely. So as you can see, other departments have done similar things using different platforms. Ours is Google Sites, Wix, Weebly, Wakelet. You can start to pull lots of things together so that you've got a really great bank of resources for your students to work with. Go to the next one, please.
I was going to say, just as a little drop for us as well, in the bottom right there, we've got our digital wellbeing site.
Yes.
So if anyone's interested in talking more about digital wellbeing, then please do get in contact and we can go through that as well.
Yes, thanks, Holly. Sorry. Right, speedy marking. Marking is not my favorite thing, if I'm honest. It's not. I can think of other things to do. One of the things that we found really helps with marking and feedback, especially, is we've started using Mote Notes for our students. So Mote is a free extension that you can get for Chrome that will work across slides, docs, sheets, websites, classroom. It also has the opportunity to just embed it as a link onto any site or web page. So if you are more Microsoft focused, you can use it on that as well. And you can record an audio note for your students attached to their work. So I will highlight a section of their documents. I'll record me going, this is great, but why don't you think about doing this and this and this? Click send, and they get to hear my lovely dulcet tones through their work. Again, it really helps with giving a more human element to your feedback rather than things maybe being misinterpreted through text. They can hear you sort of and the tone of your voice. So there's no sort of miscommunication in that sense. I've also found it really helps with some of my learners with additional needs who find reading banks of text quite difficult. They find it much better to be able to listen to my voice, pause it, write notes, jot it down, play it again. And there is an option to transcribe those as well. So you can get the best of both worlds. We've also got examples on here of other software that we use for marking. So ClickView is an amazing resource, which is full of video content from both TV and the internet. And what ClickView will allow you to do is actually create your own quizzes and kind of questionnaires linked with a video. So you can select the video on your subject area that you want to use, and there's a really vast array of topics, and you can embed questions at key points in the video, which are either open questions or yes, no quiz questions, and students can work through those more independently, making their own answers to what they're watching, and with that's had really positive responses with the students. And again, it gives us a really good assessment of their knowledge and their understanding without us having to mark everything ourselves. They do already have their own example ones as well. You don't have to make your own if you don't want to. It just depends what you're kind of working with. You've also got Google Forms in the bottom right. So we use these a lot with regard to some of our flip learning lessons, where maybe the students are working more independently in flip learning, also blended learning, different names. So they'll be set a task to do more independently. And then at the end of the session, we'll use Google Forms to check their knowledge. And, can you name these 3 tools that you just researched? What terminology would you use for this picture? Spot the hazards in this, whatever it might be. And those will mark, automatically. So you can, again, get a really quick assessment of how your students are doing as a result. The other one we haven't got on here, which I would mention, is in Google Classroom, which is Rubric, which allows you to add in criteria for an assessment and digitally mark it and click on it, so that the students can really visibly see what criteria they passed and what they haven't. That's probably a whole session in itself. So if anybody uses Google Classroom and wants to know how to do that, get in touch with us, because we've got loads of resources on it. But anything that makes marking just a little bit quicker, I'm all for, because otherwise it could take forever. I think I've got one more, haven't I? Yes. So communication. We are very much Google driven as a college, and we use Google Chat in particular to talk with our students. So Microsoft sort of Teams is the alternative. We have whole class chats that we set up. We also use them for individual chats. So I will have ones for each of my groups where I'll go, don't forget to bring this for today's lesson, or, you know, we're in this room today, or look at this that I watched last night that's really interesting. And it sets up really good conversation streams with the students. It's got a really nice community feel to it. So students will quite often help themselves out in that chat. Examples, you know, they'll say, you know, what do I need to do for this final piece? And quite often the students will have answered before I see it, which is lovely. We also had a really nice moment yesterday. One of my students has some mobility issues and was stuck in town and in quite a lot of pain, and messaged and said, I think I'm going to be late to class. Walking's taking me a while. And within 10 minutes, I had 3 different students who'd offered to go and meet them to help them come to college. It was lovely. I did tear up a little bit. And it was just a really nice way for them to communicate. I also find we're living in a world where our students have more anxieties, more hang-ups than potentially we've had before. And this is a really nice way to break down some of those barriers to communication. They may feel quite awkward at the beginning of the year, especially talking with each other, but digital formats are very normal to them. So they'll happily chat to each other in these group chats. And then that helps them to build their relationships, you know, outside of that digital world and in the classroom. The individual chats are also really invaluable. So students can contact staff about more personal issues, things they're maybe concerned about or worried with, without having to flag me down in the corridor as I'm running past to go to a lesson. They'll message me privately. Can I have a chat about this? I'm worried about this. We've also had really great success with using this method with, again, students with additional needs. In particular, we're seeing an increase in selective mutism at the moment. I have students who are communicating solely with us through Google Chat. And it's giving them access to an education and resources that they just wouldn't have had otherwise. We use it as a team as well. Me, Holly and Sky have a million different chats between all of us where we'll ping each other things across the site. So it really just helps to make things really quick, really easy, and just really accessible. The one thing I will say, you can mute your notifications. I do not believe that I should be at my students' beck and call all the time. So I do mute my notifications outside of work hours and over the weekends. I have been known to delete it off of my phone during summer holidays when I just don't want to be contacted at all. So although it's brilliant and it's accessible, it shouldn't be a barrier to your own well-being and your own personal time. And I think that balance is really important. And that's something we're also really keen on as a college, is just making sure that, yes, all this tech is here to make all this communication and things fantastic, but it's not at the cost to, our time at home with our families and our friends as well. But yeah, it is great when it works. It's a really lovely tool and a way to get hold of your students and build those relationships with them. I think, is that over to you now, Holly?
It is, yes. Sorry, delay of my turning my mic on. So we've just got 2 more examples here. So the last one here is learning checks, and very similar to that sort of feedback. These are just different ways of getting students to do activities where you can just do those in lesson sort of checks to see how they're getting on. So we've got some examples here, really nice ones. So we've got the label diagram, so getting them to label an object or a process after you've sort of delivered the learning on it to check whether they understand it. The bottom one there is a personal favourite. So that, again, this was in lockdown, but that is actually a project from our hair students who had to label the different parts of the hair molecule, but they did that via baking a cake or a biscuit and decorating it. So it's a really good and really creative way that the lecturers got their students engaging in tasks over lockdown. And it was also about their well-being as well, getting them to create and bake and do different things. So it was a really, really good example from them. In the bottom right, we've got, I think this is Powtoon, and that's just creating little animations. So sometimes the students don't like being on camera, and they don't like talking, but they're really good at articulating what they want to say via a little animation, or even just creating a slide deck and going through that as well. So it's a really good tool. And in the top there as well, we've got Dialogues. So this one allows you to basically have a conversation on a timeline. So for that one, this was one of Scott's media groups, and they're looking at Childish Gambino's This Is America video. And in this, basically, Scott created a few little timestamps with questions on, and the students then talked back and forth on the timeline to discuss those questions that he posed. So it could be things like what camera techniques were used here, what does this dance move mean in the sort of background sort of topics on it. And then the last one we've got is engagement. So this one is kind of the more the things just to try and get people a bit more excited. And sometimes they're really good ways to introduce an activity or topic. So some of the ones that we've got here. So in the top left, we've got augmented reality. And this one is using the Curoscope app and t-shirt. And I think you can get this on Amazon and other areas, so it's quite nice. But for this one in particular, it was a really good way to start off a lesson, to just get them exploring the body and seeing how things kind of worked in the wider picture. That then introduced the subject to the teacher, for the teacher to then go into more detail and talk about it in a more technical way. So it's a really good starter activity. We've got down the bottom left, again, 3D scanner. So for this one, the students were able to actually capture their cakes that they had made and then show them off to their friends and everyone else. And again, we're able to then label that as well. In the top right and the bottom left, we've got some sort of 3D modeling tools and drawing tools. So for this one in particular with construction, it's a really great activity for them. And we tend to do these sessions almost every year with all the different groups that we've got. And we get them to first create a floor plan using pen and pencil. They then have to recreate it digitally using a floor layout tool. So this one's draw.io, but other ones are there. And then in the bottom right, they then create that in a 3D model. And again, it's all these interactive tools that get them engaged and understanding that concept. And again, particularly embedding the need to understand those in terms of the software that they're using construction. So those CAD tools. And a lot of those students, they don't think that technology is involved in construction, but this really introduces that to them to sort of show them what's out there. And then in the middle, we've got kind of 360 video or virtual reality. So we sort of really are aware that we're really fortunate here at BCoT and have had a lot of technology and funding to sort of help us get these tools and different things to help us. But VR and 360 videos, if you don't have the VR tech, are really good ways of creating those experiences for students. So in the bottom middle there, I believe this is health or childcare groups. Is it health and social care students? And this is a video called The Party. And essentially they can move around that 360 video with the headphones in, and they get to experience what it's like being a autistic student, an autistic person rather, and really understand and empathize with an autistic person. And particularly in this, it then meant that they could go on to write a healthcare plan, for an autistic person, then understanding their needs in a lot more detail and being able to sort of help them going forward. So again, all these tools are really great for contextualizing kind of something that maybe isn't achievable just by talking about it. And for some of them, it's just getting them engaged and excited about a topic. Again, in construction, health and safety is probably one of their driest subjects, as with many subjects. But they do a little activity where they look at a 360 construction site. They've got zombies walking around, and they have to do a risk assessment based off of that video. So it's a really good way of getting something that could be quite dull and boring, a little bit more engaging and exciting. So just to finish up then, I'll let us have a few questions and a bit of a chat afterwards, but I'll just do these last few slides. So as Scott said at the beginning, we are part of the EdTech demonstrator project, which is run by the DFE. And if you haven't already, then please do sign up to get free and unlimited, not unlimited, but as much support from us as you like. And we can do different things like those kind of quick fire back and forth, or come and do training with you, or help you create resources, or just have a little chat about some advice. This project is ending in March, so not long left, but there are talks about it being extended. So we'll update you if we hear news on that. And I'll make sure that these are posted in the chat in a second. And then finally, it's just our contact information. So if you do want to email any of us and reach out, please do that. And we're sort of happy to have a chat with you about any of the things covered or more. And the last thing is that we have got one final webinar coming up, which is on accessibility and EdTech for inclusion, which is going to be run by Skye and Becca. And that's going to look in a lot more detail about how we use technology at the college to really help those accessibility needs. So I'll hand over to you guys. Any questions from anybody? Feel free to turn your mic on or just pop it in the chat.
Yeah, I've got one, Holly. Really enjoyed that presentation, actually, and how you've categorised what tech can be used for collaboration and so on. So my current role at the college I'm at is teacher and learning coach, but I do have an interest in digital. I've been doing the online course of Edinburgh Uni, the digital education, which has been it's been brilliant. The last month we just spent gaming on Minecraft. But in terms, I've not seen, it might be my naivety or I've just not come across it before, the 3D scanner. Because we have bakery, I'm at Receive, so we've got bakery, and we have lots of learners that do an end product, and I quite like that 3D scanner. Have you used that in terms of assessment evidence as well? Obviously, you can't bam a cake in the post for the assessor, so I'm just thinking, because of lockdown, and if it ever happens again in the future, it really does showcase it a little bit better than a 2D picture. Is that how you've used it for assessment, or any further information on that?
Absolutely. I can never remember the name of the hardware that we use, but I can find it and send it to you, or maybe Skye whilst I'm chatting, if you wouldn't mind. There we go, on it already. But yeah, they were able to add the annotation. So this tool, to get it as a 3D asset for you to annotate, you do have to pay for it. But you can upload it to Sketchfab for free, which is where you can then add annotations for free as well. And like you said, the students were using that for assessment, and were able to capture evidence talking about the processes involved, or again, like what needs to go into the icing to make sure it doesn't melt in this temperature X, Y, and Z. So yeah, really brilliant tool for capturing out that evidence.
Thank you.
No worries. I'd say, any other questions from anybody else at all? And I'll just quickly get that tech lesson plan as well to share with you all. Here we go. So this is the tech lesson plan that we've got, which is that one where it's got the grid at the end, which categorizes each of those bits of technology. And then you've got the lesson plan to actually use, which we find really useful. Yeah, if there's no more questions from anybody, thank you very much for attending today, and hopefully we'll hear from you soon and can help support you in your school and college.
Thanks, that's really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Bye. Stop recording.